So that little short I just featured was entirely color graded with Dehancer. And I absolutely love this plugin. I've been using it for the past year and a half or so. I think it's incredibly versatile. I use it on pretty much all of my projects. Full disclosure, before I get into the grade, Dehancer did reach out to me to review their plugin in exchange for the full license. Additionally, using my code HTLLC at checkout for 10% off gives me a 10% commission of any purchase you choose offered by Dehancer. So before I get into this, I set up a little Rec 709 conversion just with some curves, white balance, adjustment, LUT, and warp and glow here at the bottom. And this is the C-Log profile that I shot this in, and this is our quick conversion. So I'm going to go ahead and add a corrector node, tie it to the exposure white balance, and bring it into the adjustment. I'm going to relabel this Dehancer, and then we're going to drop this right on top. So right off the bat, it's not going to look immediately the way you might want it to, and there's a few ways to go about this. You can select the camera you shot it on. In this case was the Canon EOS R in C-Log Cinema, or you can mess around and find a camera that also looks good even if it's not the one you shot it on. I know the Blackmagic Pocket 4K looks really good with some adjustments, but for the sake of this video I'm going to be using the profile I shot this video on, so that is right here. The default film stock is going to be Kodak 250D, which looks really good. I think Ektar 100, Kodak Gold, Portra 160, and Pro Image all look good, and Agfa Color 100 also look really good. But for this video I used Kodak 50D. Gives me a lot more options when color grading. So starting off with Film Developer, I don't use this tool all that much. I think a little bit of contrast can help sometimes, gamma correction as well, but aside from that, not much else going on here. Film compression, however, is a really useful tool that Dehancer does a really good job at emulating. So if we turn this on, you can see turning this all the way up sort of compresses the highlights back here, especially useful with cameras like the EOS R that don't have great highlight roll off in the first place. I like to leave this around 60, 50. White point, sort of fine where it is. Tonal range can go up, as well as the color density, sort of give it that color punch that you see in real film. Expand can stay where it is. Bring up the black point if needed. This looks fine on its own. If you have a really washed out image, this can help. White point, I like to leave that as is. The film print is one of my favorite features by far in Dehancer. I know the Kodak 2383 is a really popular look, but I love the way glossy paper looks, so I'm going to keep this here and just bring up the exposure a tiny bit. Colorhead is a really useful tool, especially when working with skin tones and lots of different colors, but I'm going to leave that blank for now. The film grain is, I think, one of Dehancer's strongest suits. In version 7 came the addition of film size and ISO, which I think is really useful, although in version 6 there was much more customization in the grain, halation, and bloom, which I think version 7 could benefit from an advanced drop-down to have those settings when you're looking for either specific tweaks or really stylized looks. However, on the fly, I think this does a great job, and the 3550 ISO is a great spot to be, and somewhere around 2018 is perfect. So as for halation, there's not a whole lot going on here in the first place, but I think sort of the sub 50 range is a good spot to be. This can be overutilized a lot, and I think halation and bloom together can sort of outweigh the image itself, and that's sort of not what I'm looking for, so I like to leave these subtle but not exactly too noticeable. Damage, breath, and gate weave, I'm not going for a super stylized old film look, so I'm going to leave these blank. Another thing I like about version 7 is the overscan look, and I think It's a really cool tool to have. Version 6 did not have this. There's a horizontal option as well as a bunch of different film looks. I think the 35 looks great. For platforms like Instagram especially, I think this is a really useful tool to have. But for now, I'm going to take this off and put my aspect ratio back on. Finally, another really cool tool at the bottom here, simple but sweet, is the quality option. And another reason I like Dehancer is how standalone it is. If I get rid of all of these and go to a higher contrast stock like 250, you can see how much Dehancer is doing to this image alone. And you can practically use this plugin as a more advanced LUT. So that's when something like this would be a great option. But on top of a full grade like this, or using bigger file formats or on bigger projects, I think the high, slower render resolution is also a great place to be. So I'm going to go ahead and copy over this grade over to here and start to tweak this out a little bit more. Going back up here, I think we can bring this down a little bit, come into our compression. This can go up, as well as our tonal range. This highlight right here is sort of getting a little bit blown out, so I'm going to try to roll that off with this white point here. Black point come up as well. I think the white point can sort of stay where it is. I don't want to mess with that too much. Print is fine. Colored and grain, all of these sort of stay where they are. And that looks good. So I'm going to copy this over to this image right here. And there's a lot more going on in this image, especially with the skin tone, the red and the blue, separated by this fully dark and light green background. So I think this is a great starting spot, but there's a little bit of highlight and mid-tone cleanup that I think this image would benefit from. So I'm going to bring this down just a little bit. 60 I think looks good. Tonal range can come down, so we see those highlights in the skin as well as the density, although that's not too much of a difference. With a lot of highlights and mid-tones like this, I think this is when something like black point is useful. Sort of see that around the edges a lot more. Again, print is where it needs to be. Color head, example here, if we take the shadows and bring them down, you can see orange, red shift. Same for the mid-tone. I think this image out of camera looks fine as is, which is why I'm not going to mess with this, but this can be a really useful tool. I think the rest of this looks good, especially with this little blur, subtle blur on the edges. It's not entirely obvious. It gives it that movie look on top of the 235 aspect ratio. All in all, I can't get away from using this plugin. I use it on pretty much every single project. I also think it looks great without the iconic film artifacts like the grain, halation, and bloom. If I take these off, it looks equally as good. If you're not looking for that classic film look, you know, Dehancer on its own is a brilliant color transform plugin, even without the rest of these adjustments. Like I said in the beginning, use code HTLLC at checkout for 10% off of any of Dehancer's products, in return giving me a 10% commission. So I hope you enjoyed. I absolutely love this plugin. I can't recommend it enough, so definitely go ahead and check it out. Thank you.